all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 28, part 5, on our series on writing life. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. And today, on this part of our series on writing life, is a topic that is going to be, I think, kind of fun to talk about because Ben and I have not talked about this together. So I'm interested to hear what he has to say about writing groups. So we're talking about groups of writers who get together, whether maybe online or in person, who work together in either a roundtable setting to read each other's work, or in my case, where we do not really read each other's work in progress, but we sit around a table and drink wine and try and bang out a couple of paragraphs simultaneously, like we're all working on our different works in progress at the same time, and somehow think being in the same room with a bunch of women that we're not going to talk for 2 hours and just focus. It's supposed to be like we're getting together to focus on our writing. I don't know how productive it is, but we feel productive.
Yeah. Well, and that's a big part of it. I mean, we're talking about writing life here, and writing groups can be a really important part of your writing life. And that's the first point, actually, I want to make about writing groups, is that they can give you moral support. And as writers, it's a very lonely business because you're sitting there by yourself, plugging away at your keyboard, and often other people in the family may not be that interested. Your friends don't really want to hear about it. So who do you talk to about this thing, which is your passion? Writing groups can be great for that. It's a sympathetic audience for you to just come and babble for 5 or 10 minutes about your writing project, and you know that they're going to listen. And that in and of itself is of value. If nothing else, just having an outlet for your creativity to share with somebody can be really important for a lot of people. So that's why I think writing groups are good. Right out of the gate is that moral support. And if you sit there and drink wine the whole time, or margaritas, I believe is the tradition in many writing groups, then that's great. It's all part of the fun. It's part of the camaraderie. Writing groups that I have visited, as a publisher, I often gave a lot of talks to different writing groups about the. My standard talk was a no BS look at the publishing industry. And I wanted to give authors, the straight goods on what it was to publish. And so I've seen writing groups of all different sizes, from like 6 people who get together in somebody's house to 50 people who get together at the local library to my favorite, the Atlanta Writers Club. That's right, guys, shouting out to you, the Atlanta Writers Club, which has thousands of members.
Wow.
And often have to meet online. So all different sizes, all different styles. Sometimes just a bunch of people getting together and drinking margaritas, but definitely something to think about whether it's something that you, the listener, might be interested in. So, Sara, what's your experience?
I actually didn't know that margaritas was like a standard thing for writing groups. Is this like a West Coast thing, or is this a thing that us in Wisconsin have never heard of, and we're, beer, wine, and old fashions kind of people?
I may be confusing it with book clubs. Um, I, that,
Still wine here. I just don't know where the margaritas are coming in.
and I may just be referencing a very old Simpsons episode, but
No,
whatever.
no, that's fair. That's fair. No, my writing group used to meet a lot more consistently, and we were the small, like 4 to 6 of us meeting in someone's house, someone's basement, someone's dining room, someone's kitchen table, and we'd usually try and keep it to about 6, or I'm sorry, about 2 hours. Wow, I was thinking 6 people, 2 hours, and um and try and do as much as we could. And some people would be like, this is the only time I carve out to write, period, because they were more hobbyists, and are hobbyists. Other people had actual novels that they are publishing, and consistently so. One of us um writes a ton of Sherlock Holmes types of mysteries, and she has like a following, and it's a whole thing. It's her full-time job is writing novels all the
Mhm.
time, every day. So she always had stuff to work on too. And it was nice because everybody was at very different levels, having very different publishing experiences or making different publishing choices. One, self-published a small book of poetry. I mean, it was all the gamut, and we meet much more rarely now because all of us have kids at that age. We're lucky to see our husbands more than, like once a day. The ship's passing in the night, let alone carving out even more time to be social, which is essentially what our writers group was. But everybody was super supportive. They'd read each other's work, both unpublished and published. And that was nice to know you had a group of people who you could bounce out, troubles with. Either, I remember one time the girl who writes Sherlock Holmes, she was like, "Do you think I should just like write and see like if I can use Sherlock here or there, or they'll put my book in Scotland, so it was just all kinds of weird problems." But I guess that's the one thing too I wanted to touch on with writers groups is I think that there are pros and cons to them, and I wanted to talk about that.
Absolutely.
And I think for starters, pros are that what we've already said. You have people who are in the industry in a very solitary, experience who you can talk to, who can share your trials and tribulations and joys with on a level that people who don't write, can do.
Mhm.
You also have beta readers. Um, that gets tricky, I think, if you have a wide variety of genre writers, and if someone's always writing thriller mysteries and you show up with a spicy romance,
Mhm.
they might read it because they're your friend, but they're not going to have the same kind of feedback you might be needing like a
Yeah.
true beta reader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was another point I was going to bring up about one of the benefits of writing is that you can get some initial feedback. Just someone's going to read your stuff. But you're absolutely right, Sarah, to raise that caveat that are these people actually qualified to give you feedback? Because if you're all just a bunch of first-time amateurs, you can certainly give each other moral support and you can certainly give each other feedback. But how good is the feedback? And I'm not saying it can't be good, but it is something to be mindful of as you go into a writing group that offers feedback. Is A, you got to be ready to take that criticism if it comes. You got to be able to process it and figure out what is good for you and what, that person didn't get it. So I'm not going to change the fundamental core of my book because that person didn't get it because they don't like spicy romance. So um, that it can be a con, but it can more often, I think, be a pro if you go into it with the right attitude.
I think also when you're working with your writers group, if you do want feedback, I think some of the best ways to do that is to have parameters. And maybe some writer groups have that where,
Hmm.
if especially if they're big enough or they're more established and they say, this is the kind of feedback we're looking for. We're only looking for the feedback on the first chapter. Would you keep reading? Or what is confusing to you?
Hmm.
And what do you think we need to clarify so that it's more interesting, or it's understandable, and that you can get from anyone kind of in any walk. I
Hmm.
don't, because I don't see my writers group that often. I have a couple girlfriends in my book club who I sometimes will bounce off like just the first chapter, and they'll bring up really good points and be like, what's the name of the main character? Oh my gosh, I forgot to put that in. Or they'll be like, "Can you clarify what this word means?" And I'm like, "Well, you don't need to know that right now." And then I was like, "Well, probably if it pulls them out of the story." Like, so if you can give parameters, I think that even if it's kind of uh I don't want to say amateurish, but if you're talking to someone who's not like a full-time editor,
Yeah.
that can be, at least it can kind of keep it easy to sift through what's
Yeah.
good, what's bad, and what you can and can't use from them.
Yeah, and it's really useful for the people who are giving the critique because often if you're an aspiring author, you're just getting started, you don't really know how to give critiques. Like you can say, I liked it, or it didn't work for me. Sure, there is some value in that, but why? And what I've done with beta readers sometimes, I've sort of given them like 5 questions. Here's what I want you to answer specifically. And one of the questions I loved asking is I'd give them Act One of the book and I'd say, what do you think is going to happen next? because that would be very telling to me as to what have I actually said on the page? What have I set up? What signposts have I put into the writing that my readers are now expecting me to address? And I was sometimes pretty surprised, like, oh, yeah, I wasn't going there at all. Huh, did I say that? So it can be very useful. But yeah, if you can frame the feedback as specific questions, or like you said, Sarah, a specific type of guidance is what we're going to give here. So everybody sort of knows to give the same guidance every week. That can be very useful. But you very cleverly identified one of the potential pitfalls of an amateur writing group is the quality of the feedback that you might get.
Yeah. Which is why having a wide variety is nice when you have a large group, so you can draw on some more experienced writers if you're just coming in, for sure. I mean, yeah, I think one of the pros that I want to touch on
Mhm.
too is that depending on the timing of your writers group, I mean, if you have enough people and you say it's every third Thursday of the month, we're getting together no matter who can make it, whether that's 1 or 17 of us, and we're always going to meet here, or we're always going to meet online, or the link is always open, and then it's there. I think that that can help with kind of that what we talked about in other episodes, which is creating structure. How do you fit writing into your writer's life? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, accountability is a huge part of this.
1 sec.
Yep.
My stupid children. Oh, they left the refrigerator door open and it started to beep, and it would not have shut off unless I went to
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll just repeat my last line there
Yes.
and we'll go
Thank
from
you.
there. So, yeah, accountability is a huge part of writing groups. If you can have people that you have to answer to, especially with deadlines, especially with getting the next chunk of your book written, it's huge. A lot of people really, really can benefit from that motivation. Now, the downside, of course, is that it might put you under a lot of pressure that you just can't reach. And so you got to, again, you as the individual have to manage that. Is this a realistic schedule that I can keep to? Well, try it. If it's not, that's okay. But, at least there's structure there that might be able to help you if you're in part of a writing group.
Well, and even if they do have that structure, you can tell yourself, okay, that everybody's always sharing the next 10 pages every week. I'm going to share my next 10 pages once a month, the
That's right.
last or the first, Thursday of or whatever, whenever they meet. So I think most writers groups can be flexible, but they still will offer you kind of some guideposts on, you know, to get things done that
Yeah,
you might not normally give yourself otherwise.
just some accountability.
Yeah.
Even if you're setting your own goals, well, I've got a bunch of people that I'm meeting with, and that has certainly been the case for me. I was in a writing group of two for a bunch of years, actually. Me and my friend Rich would get together every Friday and talk about what we'd accomplished that week with our writing and what we want to do the next week. And we'd usually meet for about an hour, but at the end of it, we would always set our goals for the week. Okay, what's your goal this week? And usually it was something like 1,000 words a day. So that's what I want to get down on the page, 1,000 words a day. And both of us would admit from time to time, yeah, it got to Thursday afternoon and I had written nothing. So there's Thursday night, desperately, because I got to talk to Ben tomorrow. Rich is going to ask me tomorrow. So, but again, the accountability works. And for some people, that's a very powerful thing, is to have that accountability and those goals.
Yeah.
Some people hate it. And, dear listener, you got to decide for yourself. What kind of person are you? If you don't like being held accountable to these goals, maybe it's not for you. But it's something to try out for sure. Give it a try. See if
Well,
it
and
works.
some writers groups don't even have
Yeah,
those kinds of
you're
things
right.
either, where it's just we're like mine, we get together and we write, and whether we write 200 words or we edit, 7 pages,
Yep.
something gets done. We set aside time to do something, but it's a lot more laissez-faire for us. And I think what we're saying too is for every pro for a writers group, there's a con depending on what kind of writer you are.
Yeah.
I think, but I do think that having some sort of writing community around you, whether it's online or whether it's in person, whether it's on a Zoom, is ideal in some way, shape, or form to pull us out of our very tiny little private space of writing that we
Yeah.
all live in otherwise.
Yeah, and especially for folks out there who are just starting writing, you're just getting into it, or you've been doing it for a while and you've been completely by yourself. It can be a big leap to sort of open up about your writing to other people, particularly if you're writing about something that's really personal to you and it really means a lot to you. To share that can be a big jump. And, we understand that. And if you're not ready for it, then hey, don't do anything about it. Just keep writing. But if you think, yeah, you know what, I am kind of lonely here, or I'd like some feedback, or I just want to know that I'm not doing this by myself, writing groups can be there for that. You're right. The social support is still a huge thing, and you find the right group of people, and you can have some friends for life. Even if you eventually stop talking about writing, you can still meet some really nice people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what we're trying to say is if you haven't done it, maybe try it.
Hmm.
And if you are nervous about it, don't be. I mean, in the end, it's all people who are just like us who all have, imposter syndrome usually in some way, shape, or form with their writing. And I mean, even us, we've published several times each across genres with big publishers, and I still have imposter syndrome when I start talking to other writers. It's so
Oh yeah,
weird how it never goes away.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Um, and um, Interesting, like you mentioned the big publishers. You may go to a writing group that has people who have been published and people who haven't been published, like your writers group, Sarah. I mean, there's you, and then there's the Sherlock Holmes lady. So there's at least two of you, who are published authors. I wouldn't want anyone to feel threatened by that or to feel intimidated by that. Published authors are not any better than non-published authors. They're just a little further down the path. That's all. And most published authors are really, really happy to share their experience. So that is another benefit of some writing groups. If you happen to be in one that has people who have been in the industry, they can give you advice. They can say, yeah, this worked for me. This didn't work for me. Watch out for this. Or if you, as an aspiring author, say you want to hire an editor, you've never done that before. Okay, well, maybe some of your writing group people have worked with editors that can recommend someone to you, or they can just tell you what to look out for. You know, um,
Yep.
Advice on the industry can be really, really good.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that that's something that I don't really recognize, but now that you're saying it, I mean, even amongst our writing group, I mean, because even amongst us published authors, some have self-published, some are mid-published, some are traditionally published, everybody's coming at it with different experiences of the publishing industry. So ideally, you're not even getting just one person's personal experience that you have to
Hmm.
use as your roadmap. You're getting a couple people and you can pick and choose what you think you want to try. So
Hmm.
I think if anything, too, it's kind of a chance to network without having to pay the cost of going to a writing convention, or an expensive workshop. It's something that usually is just a way to start meeting people whom you
Yeah.
might be able to, depending on how, if they're published and they, are up for writing blurbs for your first book, that might be where you get your first couple of blurbs is from these kinds of writing communities that are there to support each other without any type of, um, you know, caveat, I guess,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
writers supporting writers.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and I guess the one potential con of getting industry advice from a writing group is, like you said, Sarah, if it's just one person's personal experience, just be mindful that that is one person's experience. And so you might get someone who's really cynical and jaded, and it just is a total downer about the industry. Um, or you might get someone who was really lucky and just sailed through it. And oh yeah, it's easy. Yeah, oh it's awesome. I love my agent. Oh my editor. Like yeah, maybe. But you have to understand that each one of us will have a different experience. So it's a great way to start. But just keep in mind that whenever you hear from one person, that's their experience, and just take it. Soak it up, learn from it, but remember that that isn't the only way. It isn't the only path forward. There's lots of different ways to move through the publishing industry.
Yeah. And so much is not controllable.
Oh yeah, Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
So,
Cool. So yeah, I agree. Like you said, Sarah, everyone out there, if you haven't tried a writing group, try it out. If you are in a writing group, then let us know what your writing group is like. Drop us a line or leave a comment and tell us what your writing group is good or bad about, and we'd love to hear from you. And so I think for that, that's our show today, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats, and feel free to leave a review because it really does help us a lot. If anyone is looking for any help with their writing, we recommend our friends at Cascadia Author Services. You can find them at cascadiaauthorservices.com. And you can catch up with Sarah at saradahman.com and on Instagram.
and you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you again for joining us today. Please reach out if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover. And in the meantime, we will see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.